to memory lane with you. Take me back to hours of fun with you.
It's time for the Pop Culture Classics Podcast, a celebration of the all-time favorites and the people who brought them to life on TV, film, stage, theme parks, and recordings.
We take off our hats to you, so let's bring on the show.
We're glad you've joined us. And now your host for Pop Culture Classics, Greg Ehrbar.
Thank you, Kenny Woods. Welcome to Pop Culture Classics. I am Greg Ehrbar, also host of the fantastic world of Hanna-Barbera on this same streaming service. Today we have the amazing, and I know that word is used a lot, but this has to do with comics, so you can use amazing, Mark Evanier, who is not only the creator of Gru, which is a long-running comic co-creator with Sergio Aragonés, who is also a wonderful, wonderful person, and let's say the showrunner of the Garfield series, two of them, the writer of, Dungeons and Dragons, many Hanna-Barbera specials, TV shows, and their list goes on and on and on. Most of all, I think we all spend our days with this gentleman because he writes newsforme.com, one of the most popular and fascinating websites. And you can find out more about him there because everything he writes on there is interesting, whether it's about his aunt or about knowing Sid Caesar or about working on Welcome Back, Kotter. I tend to ramble, so let's just say hello to Mark Evanier.
And Sergio Aragonés was the creator of Gru by himself.
Oh, he was? Okay, so then I correct myself. You're the head writer and showrunner of the Gru comic strip.
No, it's, showrunner. It's two guys do a comic together,
Yes.
with the help of a letterer and a colorist. It's not, it's something like a staff.
Yeah, like in the apartment with Jack Lemmon's big office. That's where Gru is made.
My house looks exactly like the studio in that movie. Yes, that's right. I have Verna Lisi in the next room, even as we speak. And Terry Thomas is making me lunch.
But that's not why you tuned in. We tuned in for Peanuts. And the reason I mentioned comics so much is because Mark Evanier is one of the supreme authorities on comics. He just flew in from New York.
Boy, are my arms tired. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And he was there because a very, very heartwarming and wonderful thing happened. They unveiled Jack Kirby Street?
Way.
Jack Kirby Way,
right.
in New York City to throng.
And you will appreciate this, Greg. Every time somebody says Jack Kirby Way, my mind goes to the song, and how does it seem business, the company way. And I want to sing, I'll do it the Jack Kirby way, wherever.
And in many ways, the Marvel way was the Jack Kirby way. So it kind of fits. How to draw comics the Jack Kirby way. So there you go. Anyway, we're here to talk about a phenomenally wonderful, wonderful book. It is, as Dilton Doily said once in Archie, it's a ponderous tome. And then Betty said it's a heavy book. It's a nice, big, slip-covered book with an extra bonus feature folder filled with beautiful things, lovely tchotchkes. But more than anything else, Mark, you really were the perfect person to write this book because I know this is said a lot. I thought I knew a lot about Peanuts because I'd read all the books. I still learned things from this that I didn't know. But you also so often spoke for all of us because, you grew up with it along with us and saw the changes. And there are several instances, which we'll also discuss, along Charles Schulz's one-of-a-kind career that you described with so much delicacy, so much heart and understanding and insight. I have to really congratulate you. And I am not gushing. I'm telling you the honest truth.
Sounds awful gushy to me, though.
It's gushy. It's, you know what? I'm actually eating gushers as we speak. But this book, what the heck is the name of the book again?
The Essential Peanuts is the shorthand title.
Yes.
I wanted to call it, It's Another Damn Book About You, Charlie Brown.
You're the Goat is on there.
Yeah, yes.
Because the goat has taken on a new meaning. The cover is great. You've got the warm puppy with Charlie Brown and Snoopy and explaining how that evolved as the strip grew into the December years. and the classic cloud sequence or comic or sequence in the movie. So
Well, there's one image on the slipcase, and that's Charlie Brown hugging Snoopy. Then there's another image on the book itself that goes into the slipcase, which is Linus, Lucy, and Charlie Brown lying on the hillside looking at the clouds together, which was used verbatim as the opening of the first Peanuts movie.
yes.
Aren't the clouds beautiful? They look like big balls of cotton. I could just lie here all day and watch them drift by. If you use your imagination, you could see lots of things in the cloud formations. What do you think you see, Linus?
Well, those clouds up there look to me like the map of the British Honduras on the Caribbean. That cloud up there looks a little like the profile of Thomas Eakins, the famous painter and sculptor. And that group of clouds over there gives me the impression of the stoning of Stephen. I can see the Apostle Paul standing there to one side.
Uh-huh, that's very good. What do you see in the clouds, Charlie Brown?
Well, I was going to say I saw a ducky and a horsey, but I changed my mind.
It's one of those Sunday strips that everybody remembers. And it was not my idea to use that. It was Charlie Kochman's idea, my editor. You know, this is one of those cases, I should say this up front here. This book was really a team effort. I don't say that to sound humble. The design of the book was Chip Kidd, and I'm blanking on the lady's name right now who did an awful lot of it. I'm sorry. There's other people involved. There's essays in this book by other people. I feel a little guilty that my name alone is on the cover of it.
There are some magnificent essays written from different viewpoints, also from the heart, the various ways that Peanuts and the work of Charles Schulz, the mind of Charles Schulz, affected these folks' lives and careers. So yeah, there are some lovely essays in there. Yeah, and the book is beautifully designed. And actually, you did a Frank Santopadre podcast recently, Fun for All Ages, with a couple of those folks from the publisher. And they offer a lot of interesting insights too. One thing that I'm a little embarrassed I never knew, because I thought I knew about comics in the paper, was about the throwaway top of the, and I always wondered about that. Explain to those like me that didn't know.
Well, a syndicated strip is something which the syndication company sells to newspapers all over the country, all over the world, in fact. And in some cases, some syndicates carry it to greater extremes than others, but they want the strip that they're selling to be adaptable to the format of the client newspaper. So the artist who draws the strip, this is especially true of the Sunday pages, is constrained by a kind of an unofficial template that says we have to be able to cut this strip apart and place this here and this here to get this format and so on. A Peanut Sunday page, when Charles Schulz did it, is 3 tiers of panels. You might call them rows, we call them tiers. And one of the things is that the entire top tier can be dropped on these pages. You have a Sunday page section in your newspaper, and on the front page, you want to get 2 strips. You have a logo, you want to fit 2 Sunday pages of your 2 most popular strips there, and maybe you can't fit them all in if you use both entirety. So you drop the top tier off one of them. One of the many ways Mr. Schulz realized his strip was becoming popular was that fewer and fewer Sunday papers were dropping the top tier because they wanted to feature it at the top of the Sunday section. It was just a matter of something on the top page had to go in order to fit 2 strips on it. So you make it the strip so you can lop off the top strip and run just tiers 2 and 3. And then there's also a couple of little restraints on certain panels have to be certain dimensions so that they can be stacked vertically. And King Features, for years and years, and Peanuts was not with King Features, but King Features had this complicated template. You could rearrange the panels into 6 different layouts. Panel number 4 could be dropped out, and panel 8 plus panel 9 would equal the width of panel 6 and 7. I don't remember the exact numbers, but the cartoonist who did that page not only had to come up with a funny gag, he had to fit it into a rigid format visually of certain sizes for certain panels and certain panels being dropped out. Peanuts was one of the simple ones. You just lopped off the top panel. And if you look at any Peanuts Sunday page, you see the 3 tiers. Just click a look and cover the top tier and the strip still makes sense. Schulz did it the way most cartoonists is they would compose the strip as a 2-tier strip and do tier 2 and tier 3, and then go back and think, well, okay, what do I put in tier 1 that can be dropped out? Doonesbury is the same way. You look at the Doonesbury Sunday pages, the top row could be cut out completely.
But as you point out, some very creative and delightful touches were put into those panels. For example, Charlie Brown's head as a globe. Some very fun opening panels resulted from that. Now that these have become more available in print, you can see those. But I remember when it was 2 tiers and didn't know why.
Well, it was 2 tiers in the paper you were reading. It was 3 tiers in the papers. Yeah.
You also mentioned how in the Sundays, I don't know why we're on the Sundays, but we might as well be. In the Sundays, quite often, there would be a running gag that only he could get away with, in a way. Almost every frame was the identical thing, except for some slight changes. And you've got some examples in there. And they're classics that show just how brilliant he was.
Yeah, he's amazing talent. And one of the themes of the book is the fact that this was one of the very few newspaper strips with a long run that was done by one person. No assistants, no other letterer, no other inker, no gags written by other people. Most of the great newspaper strips of the past were team efforts. One guy obviously was the dominant one. He was the guy who signed it. Such, but he'd hire assistants. Milton Caniff had assistants. Al Capp had assistants. Walt Kelly had assistants. Doonesbury's done with assistants. It's a lot of work to do a daily strip and a Sunday page every day. And if your strip is popular, that's not all you have to do. You have to deal with the merchandise and you have to deal with business contracts and things like that. And Schulz, even to the end, the last year or 2 of his life, he was having a tremor in his hand. He was having trouble. The strip got shaky. You can see it in some of the published strips. And nobody would have faulted him if he suddenly brought in somebody younger and newer to do the inking or to correct him, stuff like that. But he was very doggedly determined that strip was never going to be by anybody else, not even a line of it. And of course, he specified that after he died, Peanuts could live on, but not the strip. The strip went reprint. On the last ever Peanuts strip that ran, he was too ill to draw anything. So he dictated to Paige Braddock, who was one of the people who helped us with the book and who was working in his office at the time, pick up this drawing and print it. So there was all Schulz drawings. There's a few times in the later strips where they had to fix some of the dialogue for different reasons, and they would not have it relettered. They would take Schulz old strips and cut out the letters and rearrange them. It's like doing a blackmail note or something like that, so that lettering was his lettering, even if he didn't do it all for that word or something. And that is one of the, in the book, I tried to make the point of how that single-mindedness of it is one of the things that contributed to the strip's longevity and it becoming so personal to people. It was not just a gag strip that you laughed at and forgot about. There was a human being, a soul behind it, always.
Virtually none of it came from anyone but him, even the ideas.
Yeah, he listened to everything. He read all his fan mail. He answered a very high percentage of it, as if he had nothing else to do all day, right? He was very responsive to his readers. There's a quote from Schulz that I was not able to use in the book because rightfully the Peanuts people insisted that anytime we quote Schulz, we have an absolute verified source for when he said it, where he said it, and the words were exactly right. Because there's a lot of fake Schulz. The internet is full of fake quotes by people.
Yeah.
I believe it was Abraham Lincoln who wrote that on his blog. And so I had read the quote. I remembered it. Other people remembered. We couldn't find the exact place. And the quote was something like, he was asked about the merchandise because no strip had more merchandising ever than Peanuts. And he said, I'll be walking along the street or driving and I see some kid wearing a Snoopy t-shirt or he's got, Charlie Brown on his book cover or something like that. And I think, isn't it wonderful that my strip means so much to these people that they want to wear it or they want to have it as part of their life, of the decorations of their life. He did not think, cha-ching, I just made it $4. Oh, that kid just gave me $3. He didn't need the money. By the time Peanuts was popular enough to have all that merchandise, he was already a millionaire. But he was very aware of the fact that Peanuts was touching people's lives. And I saw that. He was at the 74 San Diego Con. He only went to one of them. I spent some time with him. He had me walk around the dealer's room with him, explaining a lot of things that were aspects of cartooning that were just alien to him. So quickly in the comic books, because he wasn't really involved in the comic books at that time. He'd ask me, who did that? Why did they do that? How long has that been running? And things like that. And I was, of course, a fount of information on this stuff. But every so often, every 3 steps, someone would come up and tell him how much Peanuts meant to them. And there was like a family sense there, like, oh, and when you had Linus did that, just like my little brother, and then they argued, I realized, hey, we're arguing like Lucy and Linus argue, and things like that. It transcended just being a newspaper strip. It became a family that we watch and knew and consider ourselves an extension of.
Yeah, I think all of us have those stories. For me, it peaked during the era of the moon landing when the specials started taking hold. My parents let me stay up to watch Merv Griffin salute Charles Schulz, and the band played Snoopy versus the Red Baron. It was never rerun. Boy, am I grateful to my parents.
I cited part of that in the text of the book. I cited how Bill Melendez and he came on and both drew characters and things. And Merv Griffin grabbed the Snoopy drawing Schulz did and said, I just made a lot of money. Joke about that. And the people at the Peanuts Museum, the Charles M. Schulz Museum and Research Center in Santa Rosa, which I recommend to anyone who's into Peanuts, they had no copy of that. They had no memory of it. I had told them something they didn't know about Peanuts because I've got a really good memory for stuff like that. It's just a matter of the characters just wormed their way into our lives and stayed there no matter how old we got.
And you explain through your explanation and also through his explanations about how the characters developed, why some lasted, some did not, and why some began to supersede others. I always wondered, well, Lucy was there, but she wasn't as dominant when Peppermint Patty came in. And some of the comics emphasized for a while Snoopy and his little birdie scouts and stuff. And he did read that mail, and he did address like, okay, maybe I need to do a little of that, or I don't want to do the football gag anymore, but people wanted that. So he did respond to that.
Yeah. A lot of times people would write in and say, hey, we haven't seen Pigpen for a while. Just one person might say that. And he'd go, oh, you're right. I haven't used Pigpen for a while. And he'd sit down and make a special effort to come up with a Pigpen gag. I mean, I got to spend some time with Schulz in his studio and other places. I liked him tremendously. We got along well. There were a couple of projects I was going to be involved with that never materialized. But he just was a very caring man who really wanted to do the best newspaper strip ever.
He loved being a cartoonist. It's what he wanted to be. It's what he always felt of himself as, no matter how the Peanuts empire outside of him grew. I draw this strip, and no matter what happens, no one has set a pen mark to this. As long as I'm doing the labor on that, that justifies it. But he didn't just do that. He did other things. Some comic books had other, and you point out a few of those. One that's not a very good example. It's like, good Lord, did he ever read Peanuts? And there were some ads too. There were some ads for like Dolly Madison and stuff where it's like, that's not Charlie Brown talking. It just isn't. But he did do greeting cards. He did do some merchandise. And besides the Holt Reinhardt Winston books, he was also doing comic books, at least at first.
Yeah, off and on, yeah. There were a couple of different runs of Peanuts comic strips. Western Publishing, as you know, did a whole bunch of them. And then later, they did them through the Dell imprint. They were partners with Dell Publishing. And later, on their own, they did the Gold Key imprint. I think the Gold Keys were all reprints of the, it was important to Schulz to maintain control. That's not that unusual. I mean, Lee Holly did the Ponytail comic books and the Ponytail strip. And Mort Walker had a lot of the Beetle Bailey, High and Lois comics done out of his studio with his assistants drawing them. Schulz had assistants on the newspaper strip in terms of guys who would do the work, not on the daily strip itself, but some of the other work he had to do, some of the merchandise art, like, hey, will you clean up these drawings, will you, erase this and stuff like that. The Dell comic books, Schulz wrote them all or co-wrote them all and drew some of them and supervised them closely and did the covers, because they were, to him, part of the extension of the strip. They're not that different. And he also grew up on comic books. He was a big avid comic book collector. They're one of the reasons he became a cartoonist. I don't think he ever thought of Peanuts characters as characters who only exist in 4 panels a day daily strips. They were characters that would appear any place. If you'd gone to him in the 50s and done what we now call a graphic novel, and he had the time to do it, he would have been wonderful. He would have said, oh, great, I can do a 92-page story, my characters. That's why he was able to write the TV specials and the movies. He didn't just think of the characters only as comic strip characters.
That's a point I wanted to bring up. I'm so glad you gave me that segue, is somebody who could go from a comic strip or a Sunday or a running story, which made their way into the films and the TV show. That's one thing, but being able to be comfortable, and I'm sure that Bill Melendez and the story department, they partnered on this, but being able to transition, it's difficult. You know, we've seen that where a half-hour series is made into a feature or something. It's not an easy thing to do. He managed to do that and also write all the specials, which is really a different set of muscles.
Yeah, there's a special secret ingredient in the TV specials and movies, which has to be mentioned. It's called Lee Mendelson.
Yes.
I worked for Lee Mendelson for years. He was one of the nicest, smartest, one of the smartest people I've ever met in a career in show business. Kind, generous. I did a project, a couple of projects, a lot of projects for Lee. One day I checked from him for $8,000. I didn't know what it was for. And I called him up and said, "What's this for?" And he said, "Oh, I found a day 4 or 5 years ago we should have paid. We underpaid you accidentally on something."
How rare is that?
How many people do that? I had never noticed it, but that was how generous and honest Lee was. And he was very practical. He's the one who sold Charlie Brown Christmas to Coca-Cola, basically, and to CBS. I worked with him on a project which was filmed and never aired. It was an hour-long special for CBS on the history of comic strips. And I sat in the meeting with him when he was negotiating the license fee and what we'd be paid for it and the delivery and all the technical stuff that a lawyer might otherwise handle. And I've just marveled at his ability to, first of all, get a good deal for the show and get exactly the deal he wanted, and to fight with this business affairs guy in a way that it was a very contentious argument, but at the end they both hugged and they were friends.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't poison the creative atmosphere. Sometimes you have projects, and I've worked on some of them, where you start fighting with the network or some guy at the network, and pretty soon it's kind of like, okay, here's your money. Now this would be damn good what you do. You know, you're suddenly in an adversarial position with the people you're working with.
Yeah.
And he was a very friendly, smart guy. He got along with everybody. When he and I went up at CBS together, everybody would come out of the woodwork to shake hands with him because he was one of their longest serving outside producers. He kept producing shows that got ratings for years and years and years, not regular series, but all these specials, and not just Peanut specials. He did other things. He did the Garfield specials and the TV Saturday morning show, which I wrote.
Yeah, I remember also he did, and you can get this through the Charles Schulz Museum, the unaired original Boy Named Charlie Brown. But I used to wonder, why is the soundtrack album say A Boy Named Charlie Brown with Vince Guaraldi, the one that's on Fantasy Records and keeps getting reissued? It was originally called Jazz Impressions of A Boy Named Charlie Brown, and it's been reissued like that. But that wasn't the movie. That was this special made for CBS that was never shown, except parts of it later in another special, Charlie Brown and Charlie Schulz. Well, that special is lovely because it shows the early days before the real explosion began, where he's taking his kids and neighborhood kids to school and just talking.
Charles Schulz's day begins at 8:20 each morning when he drives 4 of his 5 children to school. Meredith 14, Monty 12, Craig 11, and Amy 8. On the way, picking up neighbors as well, we ask him how often his ideas come from his own children.
I think I probably get more ideas from watching my own kids than I probably really would like to admit. This whole business with Lucy being a fuss budget, I know came from our first girl, and all of the things with the blanket came from the first 3 kids which we had because they all had blankets. And then I suppose just watching the little arguments that they go through and this sort of thing has given me quite a few ideas too. So this is the way it goes most of the time. Morning, Kenny. Morning, Mike.
Mr. Schulz.
How'd your dad do in bowling last night?
Got 210.
Most of my ideas come from my own childhood experiences. In a way, it's a little bit embarrassing to realize that maybe 40, 50, 60 million people are reading about some of the dumb things which I did when I was little. Basically, I guess Charlie Brown is really me. I'm just about 100% Charlie Brown. Morning, Randy.
Morning, Charles. Hi, Randy. Hi.
I like to think that the strip is about children everywhere, because I really believe that children, no matter where they live, are basically quite alike. But it's also about the pressures which are on these children, the pressures which they get not only from other kids around them, but also from their parents and then from school too.
It's golden.
And Lee was a steady hand in all this stuff. Lee was a producer kind of devoid of ego. He's willing to let Charles Schulz be the big giant ape on the Peanuts specials and not try to insert himself as somebody else might have. Schulz had control, and Lee knew how to talk to him, and Lee knew how to say to him, Sparky, I don't think that's a good idea. Can we do this? And they had a very good relationship. I can't verify that this story is true, but a third party told me that when Bill Watterson was hitting it big with Calvin and Hobbes, and Calvin and Hobbes suddenly became one of the hottest strips that ever came along, he was getting all these offers for animation, tons of offers. I know that part is true. I kept getting people who wanted to hire me to write the Calvin and Hobbes special as soon as Watterson gave them the rights, which of course he never did. Well, supposedly Watterson called Schulz one time and said, I'm getting all these offers. What do I do? And Schulz said, don't do anything until you talk to Lee Mendelsohn. And Watterson and Lee had a brief conversation, and it came down to, well, if I ever decide to do it, Lee, I'll call you, but I still don't want to do it. Schulz would say, don't trust anybody but Lee Mendelsohn.
Charles Schulz, for somebody who was highly protective of his characters and wanted them to be rendered in merchandise or in any other way with extreme care, and also wanted to do the strip his way, was a collaborator when he respected and trusted the people. I mean, if you look at Snoopy Come Home, which was basically a musical with songs by the Sherman Brothers, the back cover has a beautiful thing he wrote about working with the Shermans and about hearing it changes for the first time. When you write a musical, you have to collaborate. They were in tune with each other. And sometimes the songs the songs advance the story all the time, but sometimes he wove dialogue and gags in with their songs. That's not somebody who just wants to be solitary all the time and doesn't want to hear other people's ideas. That's somebody who just cares, but also has that rare ability to collaborate.
Yeah, it's a very creative, friendly environment. Everything I've ever seen about Peanuts, and Lee is very much responsible for a lot of this, is this whole thing where it's like, here's Charles Schulz. Now, how can we get the best work out of him? How can we allow him to do what he does? He's used to writing Peanuts all by himself. How do we put him into the new context of working with animators and Bill Melendez and directors and music people without leaving behind that wonderful way he creates the strip? That's a point that I've made in a few of these interviews, that when Charlie Brown Christmas first aired, as everybody knows, CBS didn't want to air it. They thought it was boring and slow, and they didn't like the kids' voices, and they didn't like the jazz music, and they even tried to talk Coca-Cola out of running it. Coca-Cola had sponsored it. And then one day it aired, and the next day, Lee Mendelsohn suddenly gets everybody at CBS calling him saying, Lee, you did a great job. We knew it was terrific. We knew. And he thinks, oh, the rating. And of course, it had this monster rating that nobody expected. Well, here's the thing. We now today know what a wonderful show it is to watch. People who didn't know that. All they knew was Peanuts. And the only thing they could expect was to see the comic strip that they loved in the papers now moving and having voices and music. And they obviously liked what they did because the show has been rerun. It's part of Christmas for some people. It's not Christmas unless we get to see Charlie Brown Christmas.
The music is in the store. It's Linus and Lucy and Christmas Time in Here and Skating. That's another one. That's a great one. The other thing about that special that breaks all the rules, especially today with all of the segmentation and all of the people choosing sides, is to many, A Charlie Brown Christmas is the best special. I mean, it's up there with Rudolph and the Grinch, but to many, it's the greatest, and it's always on, and it's revered. I don't think anybody dislikes it. And yet, the thing that scared the network the most was it's got a Bible verse in it. Nobody has a problem with that because it's done in such a gentle, non-confrontational, it doesn't have a sledgehammer attached to it. It's just, here's how I'm explaining it. Charlie Brown gets the idea that there's more to Christmas, finally gets it. They sing a carol at the end, but it's done in such a really, it's organic. I mean, how do you feel about that? Because that would make people go, ooh, I don't, one way or the other.
Well, I think the Bible verse was acceptable because Linus read it and it was in context.
Yes.
And it was read by a child. I think if an adult had read it, it would have been different. but it was completely on story. You know, there's an emotional attachment to that special. When Lee died, I flew up to San Francisco for the funeral to speak at the funeral. And what preceded me to the stage was David Benoit, who's now the kind of keeper of the Vince Guaraldi songbook.
Yeah.
He played Linus and Lucy. They had moved a piano in just so he could do this into the room we were in. And he sat down and he played it live for everybody. And then I got up, I followed him. I got to the podium, I looked out, and there were still people wiping their eyes. There were still people who were just crying out of a certain joy and connection to the Linus and Lucy song, which has become a Christmas song in the oddest way.
Yeah.
Most Christmas music is Christmas music because there's lyrics that say Santa Claus is coming to town. You better watch out. You better not cry, you know. And if you're in, you know, a store at Christmas time and you hear playing Jingle Bells, it's an instrumental, and you go, oh yeah, there's Jingle Bells. It's a Christmas song. Or you hear them playing Deck the Halls, and there it is. It's a Christmas song. You hear Linus and Lucy being played in stores and that same music, and you go, oh yes, that reminds me of the Christmas special I love. It's a different connector there.
There are few, if any, pieces of music that are not, you know, a Christmas song or instrumental that have been turned into that.
It's just part of people's lives, you know. And Mr. Mendelssohn got paid a ton of money every time that aired. You mentioned Rudolph and The Grinch. I am of the opinion the three great Christmas specials for television were The Grinch, Charlie Brown Christmas, and Mr. Magoo.
Mr. Magoo, yes. Forgive me for not including that because that is the first. And I mean, I love the Muppet one, I love the Albert Finney one, and I love the one with Alistair Sim. But there's no Christmas Carol that touches you so deep into your heart and soul, especially because of those songs. And it also transcended Magoo because you don't have to even know who he was, and many don't. And that show is a classic.
Yeah.
Here's another thing about the specials. This is addressed and explained in the book. The strip was the strip. It's almost like character universes. A lot of this happens like with Scooby-Doo or with Archie or something. They have Vampire-onica, but that's not core Archie. That's not called classic Archie. And when they go out, why are the Flintstones doing this or whatever? With Peanuts, the little red-haired girl was never to be seen except in that one silhouette, which is in the book. But they did do a special, It's Your First Kiss, Charlie Brown, where her name was Heather and all of that. He allowed that because he saw those as different things, correct?
Yes, that's right. There's a famous story that Bill Melendez told often how with full-time Schulz came to his studio when they were in progress of doing. One of the other things to remember about Charlie Brown Christmas is it was put together overnight. It was a last-minute thing, and Melendez had good animators who weren't working at that moment and draft them into service. And I wrote a bunch of Christmas specials. I know this. You got to meet that deadline. They're not going to run the Christmas special January 5th. You got to have it in on the date that they've already cleared for it. And they just barely made it under the wire. It's possible that if they'd finished it a couple of weeks earlier, CBS would have talked Coca-Cola out of airing. I think it was already a TV guide by the time. But it was put together very quickly. Later on, they actually fixed a few animation errors for subsequent airings, changed a few places here and there. And of course, they had to change it when they took out some of the sponsor plugs years later.
Mm-hmm.
But it's such a beautiful, simple show that it works. I mentioned earlier the Charles Schulz Museum in Santa Rosa. And I recommend anybody who loves Peanuts to make a field trip to Santa Rosa, California. It's a wonderful town, first of all. And actually, if you go to Santa Rosa, you'll know that Charles Schulz was an important person there because there's Peanuts characters all over the airport when you land. And there's Peanuts characters on street corners and in store windows. And I have a feeling if you went to the city dump there would be a giant pigpen statue in the middle of it, with dust clouds perpetually encircling it. Across the street from the Charles Schulz Museum, there's the ice rink that Schulz owned. Mm-hmm. He actually worked upstairs in that studio in that building when his home studio burned in fire. I was over there one visit. Sergio Aragones and I were sitting in the snack bar area, having a snack and chatting with Jeannie Schulz, his widow. And you look over, and of course, being an ice rink, it's very cold. And we looked over, this is a weekday afternoon, and there's kids skating, and they're all bundled up, and you can't even see their faces because they've got so many big suits on and stuff like that. And they're skating around, and the music that was being pumped in was the Vince Guaraldi Peanuts music. There was other things too, but at this one section, there was somebody was putting on, some album that was all those different songs. And I looked over, and there's all these little children skating to the Vince Guaraldi music. And I went, it's come to life. This is, life imitating art, imitating life, imitating art, imitating life, imitating art. And you couldn't see it. And I kept looking, oh, that one there must be Schroeder. Oh, that one there must be Violet, I was working for a kid with a dust cloud around him, who might be Pigpen. And it just gave me chills, apart from the fact that the room gave me chills, as it happens. And so if you go to the Schulz Museum, make time to go across the street, sit in the snack bar and watch little kids skate. It's a wonderful moment.
I sound like Stan Laurel and Babes in Toyland. What happens to you at the Schulz Museum?
It's a beautiful place. I was up there last year to sign books, and I took my friend Brink Stevens with me. We walked around a little bit. I couldn't walk much, partly because they kept grabbing me to sign copies of the book, and also because I've had a knee problem. But it's like an art museum with Peanuts strips on the wall and Peanuts memorabilia, and there's some artwork that was done by other artists using the Peanuts characters or tributes to Peanuts there, and there's photos of memorable things from Schulz's life, and there's some of the merchandise. It's actually just a place to envelop yourself in Peanuts for a while. They have classrooms there. They bus kids in from schools all around the Santa Rosa, San Francisco area, and there are kids there who are being taught how to draw. They asked Sergio and myself to come up and do it, so we never got around to it. But there's little kids there sitting there drawing Charlie Brown. And they also have exhibits in there from time to time of other strips that Schulz liked. It's a very lovely day if you love Peanuts.
Oh, that's great.
They have a theater where they show Peanuts specials, and occasionally I gave a talk there, part of a panel discussion. And there's, of course, a place where you can buy Peanuts merchandise, some of which is only available at the store.
Yeah.
At the museum, rather. There's also these wonderful people who run it, who know everything about Peanuts. One of the ways I endeared myself and got accepted into the Peanuts staff committee is I did tell them a few things I've researched that they did not know about. I tracked down and interviewed the congressman who put Schulz's name up for the Presidential Medal of Freedom and interviewed him. And they were all excited that I found out some data about how that medal came about. And that's one of the reasons the book is as accurate as it is. I had all these Peanuts experts vetting it. I could call these people at any hour and say, what did Sparky have for lunch on August 14th, 1953? And if they didn't know, and there was a chance that they'd know, they would just go out and research it and find it out for me. They have a website that you can't access. I'm not sure if I still can either. I guess I still can, which has online all of the Peanuts strips, and they're all cross-indexed. You could type in, Pigpen, and they show you all the Pigpen strips. You could type in Beethoven's bust on Schroeder's piano, and they show you the strips that show that, things like that. One of the reasons I took this project on when it was offered to me was I thought, gee, it'd be fun to just spend a couple months of my life wallowing in Peanuts. Because as you know, Greg, my career has mostly been bonding with stuff I loved when I was a kid. Working with Hanna-Barbera, working with Stan Fraber, I just love all that stuff that I grew up on. I love the fact that I have been Dick Van Dyke's house, It's Dick Van Dyke. I loved his show when I was a kid. So before I even knew how much they were going to pay me and how impossible the deadline was very, very difficult with this book because it had to come out on a certain date, the anniversary, the 75th anniversary of Peanuts appearing in newspapers. And they had to back time from that for all the time necessary to manufacture this very complicated book. You've seen how complicated the printing is and the binding and special inserts, the slipcase. It was done under the gun, but I just thought, I got to do this, if only so I had an excuse to read all of Peanuts. And I started with day one and read like 4 years an evening or 5 years an evening to just read it through sequentially to experience that. I work at night a lot. So like at 3 a.m., my girlfriend would come in and say, you got to get to sleep. Come on, Mark. I go, no. Charlie Brown is going to fly the kite. I think he's going to fly the kite this time. I got immersed in it. I read all of Peanuts in sequence. And that's when you see the strips that he didn't include in a lot of the reprint books because he wasn't happy with them.
Yeah, I was surprised by that. I thought that the reprints had them all.
What Fantagraphics published recently does.
Not the Fawcett books or the Holt Reinhardt one.
Yeah. I still have my Holt Reinhardt, and they're all tattered from being read to death over the years. And I did not realize that he took very little of the first 2 years in that first book. By the time he put that book together, he had changed the way he drew Charlie Brown and all the characters, and he liked what he was doing then enough to think that what he'd done in the first year was wrong.
Do you have the book Peanuts Revisited? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I can't remember them all by name. The names all blur together, but yeah.
They do. That's why I didn't know the name of yours, and I still apologize to you and the nation and the world. But Peanuts Revisited was the size of a regular Peanuts, Holt Reinhardt Winston one. But it was about 3 times the size, and it was a collection of early cartoons. I noticed in there that it had one strip that made the reference to Lucy drawing political cartoons, just the last one, where she says the sky is bluer. I didn't see it in any other books but this one. And it struck me that, where are the other 3? I guess I don't have it in a book, some other book I don't have. It was on the album with Kay Ballard and Arthur Siegel. It was a whole track on the album, that whole story. But the entire set of strips, I'll bet, were never published until the Fantagraphics. The revelation of that was extraordinary.
Here's a question that you'll love. How do you tell the difference between a first printing of the first Holt Reinhardt book and the second printing?
Well, I don't recall it having the name on the spine.
It has nothing to do with the spine.
Okay, I swear I read your book, but I don't remember.
It's not in the book. I didn't put this in the book. This is just me telling you something that I'm sure you will find fascinating.
Yes, I would love to know.
They forgot to put the price on the first printing, so they rubber stamped it on.
Oh.
They had a rubber stamp made, and somebody had to stamp every copy of that book to print it.
The first time I ever saw that book, I was at a good friend's house, Louis Joseph. Either he or his mother had that one, because it was from 1950. It may have been the first edition. And I was shocked at the sort of lemonhead look of Charlie Brown, because I'd never seen those first ones, and how he evolved. And then from looking at your book, how quickly he changed, but he wasn't a lemonhead for very long.
Oh, one of the interesting things about a strip is the fact you do it every day. And I have a quote in there. I can't quote it verbatim, but George McManus was quoted as saying something like, "The bad thing about doing a newspaper is you have to do one every day. The good thing is that when you do a bad gag, the next day there's a new one, and the bad one yesterday is already wrapped around the fish." Mm-hmm. So that pace, you have to understand that pace that the work is done. It's not a job you finish. It's a continuous thing. Every morning you get up, you've got to do at least one strip a day, or try to. Schulz did more than one strip a day sometimes, so he could take vacations and holidays and go other places because he had a lot of responsibilities. He had to go down to Florida for the NASA stuff at some point, and he had to go to Europe for certain tours and things like that. So he had to get ahead on the strip all the time. It's not a one and done. I finished Peanuts now, I can think about other things tomorrow. No, you always think about Peanuts if you're drawing Peanuts. So the strips start evolving, and then there's like a 6-week lag time. You draw it, and then 6 to 8 weeks later you see it in the newspaper, reduced down among all the other strips, and it's different there. It's different when you do it. If you do a painting, it can look absolutely perfect on your easel, and then you frame it, put it on a wall, and it's a different painting all of a sudden, and you see the flaws you didn't see when it was on your easel. It's now all of a sudden a new context, and you look at it with a different way, and you view it differently. And so when Schulz started seeing his strips printed, it started changing. He kept looking at things, going, I think that doesn't look right. And he would change it on the strips he was drawing then. And I actually, when I was reading the whole dailies, I was aware of this. I'd see the character change a lot, and I'd look back about 8 weeks, and I'd see, okay, you compare, here's what he was looking at in the papers when he drew these strips. And you can see that he's subtly adjusting it. You can't find a strip where it changed completely, because it was like watching a pot of water boil. It just slowly, suddenly changes. There's no one strip where the boiling starts. And then he would get it right for a while, and then it would evolve further. You can look at a Peanuts daily strip and take a pretty good guess at what decade it was done.
Yeah, and this is also an interesting thing in the book. I mean, I perceived just by looking at the new ones as they kept coming out in the paper that his style was still evolving. I had no idea about his affliction, how he had to hold onto one hand. And part of it was, as you explained, he worked at a much larger size. So when it was shrunk down, it was not really perceivable at first unless you really look. But after a while, you could tell.
Yeah, and it's not because the artist changed. We're used to comic strips changing because they change artists, they change inkers, they change lots of things over the years. Peanuts changed because the size the strip was printed changed. And at one point, he got freed from those 4 identical size panels. He began making 3-panel gags and 2-panel. He became a 1-panel gag. At one point, he began using gray tones in the strip. He was just reinventing it as he went along and keeping it fresh for himself. The new challenge of, okay, I'm going to try to draw, after writing, thousands of 4-panel daily strips, he was suddenly writing 3-panel daily strips or 1-panel daily strips.
The book's format is by eras. It's broken down into how the strip progressed. So unless you read or get all the fanographics, and you can see that for yourself, this kind of breaks it down. It also talks about how the characters were introduced, how the strip was growing as a cultural phenomenon, the moon landing, which I remember. I had the same Snoopy that the astronaut had. I mowed lawns for that. I wanted it so bad. Seeing that in there was unbelievable. Was writing this book in some ways just confirming why you love Peanuts, or was it in some ways kind of transformative?
It was me trying to put into words things that I felt.
It's not easy to do that.
No, it's not. And also, it couldn't really be, here's why I loved it. It had to be, here's why we loved it.
Yeah.
There's a story that I wrote and cut out. I never even submitted it. There was a period in my life when, sometimes alone and frequently with Sergio Aragones, I'd go to elementary schools and teach kids how to draw. And there was a magic to teaching kids how to draw Charlie Brown, because I would teach them how to draw that little squiggle, his hairline when he's looking at full face. But I wouldn't tell them what we were drawing. So I just want you to learn to draw this squiggle. And then I'd go on to something else. And then I'd say, okay, we're going to draw a circle. And everybody draw a circle. Now put that squiggle there. Now put the eyes there. Now put the nose there. And you could hear the little squeals of delight as they realized that Charlie Brown was appearing on their paper. It's one of the most recognizable visual tropes you could have. And it had a big impact on a lot of kids. I felt like I was launching a budding cartoonist or two in each group. And I wrote about it. And then I looked at it and I went, no, this is about me. It's too much about me. And I took the whole thing out of the book. My choice. Nobody else ever saw it. But you also had to personalize those. You had to walk this little narrow line saying, I'm giving my view. And I want to make sure people understand it's my view. It's not a set in stone. Your view, which differs, might be just as valid as mine or more so. So I had to give my view, but I had to not pretend like it was the only possible interpretation. And if the text works, I think that's one of the secrets of it. And also, I was working very fast on that. They were shocked that I met the deadline of this book. They didn't expect anybody could. I started late on it because somebody else who was going to do it couldn't please them. So they came to me and they had this unfortunate deadline. I got the assignment. I got the job at the 2024 San Diego Con. I did 183 panels there, whatever it was, 16. And I had a half hour between panels. Charlie Kochman, who's the editor at Abrams, texts me and he says, call me when you're not doing a panel. And I called him immediately and he said, I'm coming up. And he brought up the Peanuts people to talk to me about this book. I didn't know anything about it. They just came in and started telling me. I did not know that they were looking for someone to write this book. And I talked to them for 5 or 10 minutes. I told them a funny story about meeting Schulz and stuff like that. And they said, okay, we think Mark's the one. And I went, oh, I'm glad to be the one. The one what? And they said, we need you to write this book. And I said, okay. I didn't even know how much we paid. I didn't know the deadline. The deadline, if I'd known at that moment, might have scared me off. Anyway, so I got the job at the 2024 San Diego Con. And on the 2025 San Diego Con last year, we had a Peanuts panel, and they brought in a not yet open FedEx box for me to open on the panel, which had the first printed copy of the book in this country. They print the book from overseas, and then it takes 6 weeks or 8 weeks for the freighters to bring it here. So they FedExed one copy over, and I had the only copy on this continent. And I stood there thinking, wow, this is 1 year, almost to the day, I'm holding the book in my hands.
And it's a great book, not only for fans and people who are interested in comics or cartoon history or something. You mentioned the effect drawing Charlie Brown had on children. It truly is the essential Peanuts, not that other books aren't. The biographies, the good ones, all of that stuff is valuable. But, okay, here's the essential. If you don't understand why Peanuts is what it is, or you want to see what the heart and soul is, which was his work was him, This gives you probably the most wonderful, it's the way I felt about the Disney films that Leonard Maltin wrote. There are other books about Walt Disney and they keep coming out, trucks sort of unload them almost every day. But the Disney films gave you the body of work broken down, and here's why. And this is that kind of book. The other question, and I don't want to keep you too long, you're very generous with your time, as always, the Sony acquisition. One of the key things that has been said in the press about this and the press releases is that Sony owns it, but the Schulz family, and I would assume the Schulz organization and museum, are going to have input. So it's not like it's going to be either tossed to the side or messed around with, or people will go, oh no, it's going to be a very different acquisition. Correct?
Yeah, well, it already has been specials. There's been stuff done with the characters since Schulz passed, and it's faithful. And yeah, the Schulz, there's this kind of collective there. You have the people who run the museum, you have the people who run Charles Schulz Creative Associates. If you met them, you'd understand the Peanuts is in good hands, because these people love the material. It's a dream job for some of these people to spend their whole lives wrapped around this. And I was a little worried that maybe there'd be somebody there who'd be annoyed that they didn't get to write the book. Somebody who's devoted every waking moment with the Peanuts for the last couple of decades. Is there some guy at the museum who's going to go, I could have written this book? Well, if there was, I never met this book. Everybody was very lovely. They helped me out all they could. And I was embraced into the family. I walked in the door with Brink. I walked up to the front desk, which is part of the place where you buy Peanuts memorabilia and merchandise. We got in just before the place opened. And the lady there who'd never seen me before in her life said, may I help you, sir? And I said, yeah, I'm the guy who wrote that book over there. They had it on display. She went, oh my, and all of a sudden, like calling everybody, he's here. And we just had a good time there. I recommend going. Santa Rosa is not a tourist attraction. It's not a place you think of, let's vacation. People usually go there for the wineries. It's wineries all over the place. I don't drink wine, so it's not a place I would ever go except for this. It's about a little less than an hour north of San Francisco. Town's got wonderful restaurants, wonderful places, beautiful city. And you fly into the Charles M. Schulz Airport, where one scene from It's a Mad, 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 Mad World was filmed.
Yes.
To connect with another thing I love. As you're going through the airport, there's these beautiful big statues of Lucy and Snoopy and all the other characters. And they're around the city, too. Again, I felt like it shouldn't just be my name on the cover, because so many other people contributed to the book. Those extras things where you get, Snoopy on the moon patch, and you get the comic book, and you get some of the stickers and things like that. That stuff was already in place when I was hired.
And we have to really thank all of those people, all the people who are sustaining the gentle, almost eggshell fragile delicacy of how to handle Peanuts properly, the people who put this book together. And you who are, for someone who's lived in Hollywood so long, is so willfully modest about what you've done.
You have to be. To survive, you have to be. The minute you think that you really know what you're doing, you're in deep trouble.
Well, goodness, I thank you for so many things, Mark, but I thank you on behalf of Peanuts and everybody listening again for sharing all of this.
Always glad to be on one of your shows, Greg.
That's very nice of you to say. And I really appreciate everyone listening. As they say on airlines, you have many choices with your airline. Well, you have so many other things you could be listening to than this podcast. So it means a lot that you folks are listening and saying nice things, liking, and all the things you do. So thank you again for listening. And until next time, bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed the Pop Culture Classics podcast with Greg Ehrpart. Please join us again. And thanks for listening.